call the Finance Committee for Lancaster City Council to order at 6 p.m. First item on our agenda is Resolution 1-23. It's a resolution authorizing Law Director's Office to apply for the Violence Against Women Act grant, VAWA grant. Mrs. Tiener.
Yes, this is a grant we've had for the women, like it says, against, I don't know how many years we had this.
20 plus.
So it's something that we always use, and they utilize it, and it's something that the city needs. And it's a grant that's applied for.
Thank you. Law Director Hall, this pays for a prosecutor. Is that what you utilize it for?
So yes, we use it for one of our prosecutor's salaries. Specifically, we call him our Family Violence Unit prosecutor. He specializes in those victim cases, protection orders, and vertical prosecution in terms of handling the case. And it's best practice in terms of prosecuting those types of cases.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Tiener, we have 3 readings on this, and
Yes,
I believe Mr.
first of
Schoonover
3
is going to be the sponsor, and you're going to be the second.
Yeah, this is the first of 3 readings.
Great, thank you. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2-23, coming out of Finance, a resolution authorizing the Lancaster City Auditor to request an advance of funds from Fairfield County of the city's apportionment of tax settlement for 2023. Mr. Ailes.
First of 3.
Auditor Nettles, first of 2? Is that what?
Yeah, the county auditor is going to be bugging me for it before February. So, yes, so this is the.
First of 2.
Thank you.
And I'll be your second on that.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, Resolution 3-23, a resolution authorizing the disposition of city property no longer needed via auction or internet auctions for 2023. This is coming out of the Law Committee, and Mrs. Tiener.
Yes, if I could have Stephanie elaborate on this one at all.
Sure, absolutely. So the
Ohio Revised Code allows the city to dispose of obsolete or unneeded property via auction, and that can be live auction or internet auction, either one. The legislative authority just has to pass an annual resolution that allows for that. So this is an annual piece that we do every year so that we can dispose of unneeded or obsolete city property.
Great, thank you. I see 3 readings.
First of 3 readings, please.
Mr. Schoonover will be the primary, and you'll be the second on that.
Yes.
Great. Next item we have on the agenda is Resolution 4-23, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract or into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for purchase of sodium chloride rock salt for the 23-24 winter season. It's coming out of Public Works. Mr. James?
Sure. In absence of Councilman Schoonover, this is pretty much just an annual piece for the rock salt that they'll need for the next winter. They've got a pretty good inventory of it now, and if the weather stays like it is, we're going to be in pretty good shape. We're going to be asking for 3 readings.
And I see that you'll be the second on that, and Mr. Schoonover will be the primary on that.
That is correct.
Great. The next item we have on the agenda is Resolution 5-23, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of chemicals for use by the Division of Water. Mr. James.
Thank you, Pro Tem President McDaniel. Once again, this is an annual piece that they need to purchase chemicals. I'm going to invite one of the water superintendents, Mike Wickham, to come forward and just explain just briefly on that just a little bit.
Thank you, Councilman James. Good evening, members of council. So temporary resolution 523 is for going out to bid and entering into a contract with chemicals that we use to treat water at the north plant and also at the south plant. There are a couple chemicals. Orthophosphate that is used at both plants. Salt for regeneration is used at the north plant, and then anti-scalin is down at the south plant. So this year, instead of going out for individual bids, we are combining all 3 chemicals into one bid package and sending them out.
All right, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, anyone have any additional questions? I
You might as
see,
well stay at the podium for the next one.
I see you requesting 2 readings on that,
That is correct.
and your second is Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
All right. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 6-23, a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of pipe and fittings for use by the Division of Water, coming out of Water Wastewater. Mr. James.
Once again, I'll yield some time to Mr. Wickham to give us a little more explanation of this.
This one is, just like the last, is an annual piece to go out to bid for pipes, valves, hydrants, whatnot, that our distribution crews use out in the field. We have four possible projects for replacement in areas that experience a larger amount of breaks. And then also the miscellaneous valves, hydrants, portions of pipe that we have to replace during winter months on mainline breaks.
Anyone have any questions? Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I see that's also 2 readings.
And Ms. Teener will be the
Ms.
second.
Teener will be the second. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 7-23, a resolution authorizing the Lancaster Police Department to apply for the 23-24 Drug Use Prevention Grant, coming out of safety. Mr. Matlin.
Yes, police chief is here, but I think this is the annual piece for DARE. It's what the DARE officers use to go to the schools and do drug prevention, so just an annual piece.
I believe you are correct.
I feel like I'm correct.
So I see Mr. Ehlers is your second on that, and that can go 3 readings?
Yep.
All right. Next item on the agenda is a resolution, I'm sorry, it says ordinance on the
It's actually resolution.
agenda, but it should be resolution.
It's resolution, yeah.
8-23, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for construction of the South Water Treatment Plant Sodium Hydrochloride Feed System. It's coming out of Water Wastewater. Mr. James.
Thank you. Once again, I want to invite Mr. Wickham to the podium. On last Friday, our committee for the Water Pollution Group met out at the South Water Plant. Becky Teener, Jack Matlin, myself, and certainly Mike Wickham and Paul Vamos, the plant manager, as well as Denise Cruz. We walked through this entire project to see exactly, even though it's being funded by ARPA money, it was important for us because at that time we thought it was going to be a single reading, or 1 reading, but now it's going to be 2. But Mike, or actually I'll let Stephen come and talk with that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take this one. So yeah, as explained, we have a upcoming project at the South Water Plant, which will be primarily replacing the disinfection system there. Bids were opened last month. Based on the price that came in, we're asking for authorization to sign that contract for not to exceed $3.6 million.
I think one of the important points to note here, this will eliminate the need for chlorine gas, which is a very lethal entity when you have it on site. This will also be a mirror image for what's going to be on the new water plant. So we're trying to make everything as much of a combination of things on the old plant versus new. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
correct. Is that, Mike? Will you confirm? Yeah, I think, yeah, the uniformity between the 2 plants is certainly something the Division of Water is striving for, so
Right.
That'll help with that, absolutely.
Okay.
But the bigger issue is we don't want an accident to happen with the gas, and this really
Right.
positions the plant in a really good, safe area for the community as well as treating their water. So we're really grateful to be able to do this project right now and afford it.
And unfortunately, they're going to have to set up a temporary system in order to demolish the equipment in the existing chlorine room. And they'll be digging a pretty good sized pit for the catch basin in there, from what I understand.
Anyone have any questions on this? Looks like we're going 2 readings on it,
That's correct.
and
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Teener is your second.
That is correct.
All All right, the next item on our agenda is Resolution 923, a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriations for the county auditor and local fiscal recovery fund 2052, coming out of finance. Mr. Ailes?
First of two readings, please.
Auditor Nettles, would you cover the,
Explanation,
What we need
this
to do
is
here.
the initial 2023 budget. I was unable to stick this into the normal budget year due to the fact that we still had nonprofits. We were waiting on to the last minute, even through December, to get them paid. So I didn't know, and it's at a limited amount of cash, I'm not getting any more, so I needed to make sure I knew exactly, there's no more revenue coming in of what we had left at year end before, to set that budget against for the nonprofits and the affordable housing.
great, thank you. Anyone have any questions for Auditor Nettles? Mr. Ailes, I'll be the second on that, and as you said, we will have two readings on it. The next item on the agenda is Resolution 1023, a resolution to carry over and appropriate funds to pay bills in the Water Replacement and Improvement Fund 6025, and to authorize the issuance of a then and now certificate for payment of bills. This is coming out of water, wastewater, Mr. James.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Actually, I'll invite Stephen Wilstead back to the podium to talk a little bit about this. This is pretty much an annual piece, just appropriating the money for the things we'll need to be doing this year.
Apologies, I missed which, I'm sorry, which,
This was carryover for the Water Replacement and Improvement Fund.
oh, the 6025. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, as with a couple of other pieces that are coming up, 12 and 13, I believe. Again, these are just, our typical beginning of the year. One of the, I think, three we have, typical beginning of the year pieces of legislation to appropriate the funds in the 6019 and through the 6030 funds. So this one here is 6025. The other ones obviously will come up a couple later. But yeah, just again, appropriating that, allowing us to get purchase orders, pay invoices, that sort of thing.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Wellstead? This is also on two readings.
And Ms. Tina will be
Ms.
the second.
Mrs. Teen- Yep. All right. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 1123, a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding for the sole source provider for filter media, coming out of water, wastewater, Mr. James.
Once again, I'm going to invite Mr. Mike Wickham to the podium to discuss this a little bit. We have 6 filter beds at the North Water Plant, and we're doing our best to try and make sure that we've got enough good capacity there to get us through until the new water plant's online. But if you'd like to expand on that a little bit, go ahead.
Yes, so typically we end up seeing roughly 10 to 15 years out of a filter bed without needing to rebed it. These are pushing a little more than that. We've eked out as much water as we can out of those 2 filters. So this right here would dispense with competitive bidding. Pelton Environmental is the representative from Roberts Filter Group. Roberts is out of Pennsylvania, I believe. They take care of the Wheeler bottoms that are in the gravity filters at the North Plant. So with that, we would need to go ahead and go through Pelton to go ahead and use Roberts Filter Group. So this will end up, this will give us 5 out of 6 that we've rebed in the last 2 to 3 years, give or take. So we should be good when it comes to ensuring water quality and water quantity, especially in the upcoming months.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Wickham? All right, Mr. Matlin, what's your pleasure? And
We'll do 2 readings on that one as well, and Mr. Matlin is the second.
all right, 2 readings. Mr. Matlin is the second. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 1223, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract through the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program as implementer of the Fetters Run Ohio University Lancaster Stream Restoration Project, coming out of water wastewater. Mr. James.
Thank you again, President Pro Tem McDaniel. I'm going to invite Stephen Wellstead to the podium again. They just won't give up on this Fetter Run, and I got to hand it to them. Him and Denise Cruz are so tenacious, I just hate to have them mad at me for anything ever. Go ahead, Stephen.
And I'll give credit to Jake Pendleton in our office, has done a very good job of staying on this one. But yeah, this is our stream restoration project we have planned for the portion of Fetters Run along the OUL site, which basically stretches from College Avenue down to the high school property. I believe it's about 1,600 linear feet of stream. And yeah, through this WRRSP program, we are able to pay for, we're anticipating being able to pay for the entire project, which we've estimated at $1.5 million, using interest funds from a water pollution control loan fund project that our sponsor, the City of Chillicothe, needs to pay. Essentially, the interest they pay on their funds, or on their loan rather, gets redirected and pays for this project. So again, a big good get for us, and this legislation will allow the mayor to sign the loan agreement and keep forward on the path to hopefully looking to construct this later in the year.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Wellstead? Mr. James, your pleasure.
This will also go 2 readings, and Ms. Teener will be my second on this.
2 readings. Mrs. Teener is the second.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is Resolution 1323, a resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding and enter into a contract with Axon for the Lancaster Police Department interview room recording system, to authorize the issuance of a then and now certificate, and to declare an emergency. This is coming out of finance. Mr. Ailes.
Chief Snyder, do you have comments, please?
Thank you. This request is for the Lancaster Police Department interview room at the end of our budgetary process in '22. Unfortunately, the video recording system in the interview room went south. It's no longer functional. We did a really quick and thorough search of providers for video equipment, Axon being that we are already in their ecosystem with body camera equipment, and tasers provided the most cost-effective solution for us. And although the resolution is for $57,000, there's actually a $20,000 discount on that on the front end of the first resolution request from '22 when we did the big Axon upgrade through that legislation. So this is to basically sign to allow to enter into that contract with Axon, who is Sourcewell, immediately, so they could start working on that interview room equipment. If you have any questions regarding the emergent nature of that, I can certainly answer those.
So you need us to suspend tonight?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Please.
Any questions?
I just have one comment. Chief Snyder, this interview room is absolutely required by law. Is that correct?
It is 100% required by state law, and then also federal case law provides some obstacles for us if we don't have a video recorded interview on a felony case, especially sexual crimes are a major part of that specificity. So,
Yeah, this system has been, I think it's outdated now, the one you currently had.
yes.
So
Yeah,
this will allow us to bring it up to 2023 standards,
we hope so.
we hope. So, any questions for Chief Snyder?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Matten will be the second on that, and we'll ask for suspension on that particular item. The next item on the agenda is Resolution 1423, a resolution to set a 2023 revenue and expense budget, then amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor and the Stormwater Utility Reserve Fund 6019, and authorize a then and now certificate for the 2022 obligations that will be paid from the 2023 budget. This is coming out of water, wastewater. Mr. James.
Thank you again, Chairman McDaniel. I'd like to once again invite Stephen Wellstead to the podium for a brief expansion on some of this information.
Yeah, again, as mentioned earlier, and I got the numbers wrong, I apologize, but yeah, this one, again, just to appropriate the funds to allow us to pay our invoices in the 6019, which is the stormwater utility fund. Anything related to stormwater projects. So if you got any specific questions about anything on there, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Mr. Wellstead? We do this pretty much every year when we get to the
Yes.
new
Yes,
budgets, is that correct?
Another-
Yeah.
yes, yeah,
So nothing new here?
correct.
Mr. James, your pleasure on that?
That'll go 2 readings, and Mr. Matlin will be my second on that one.
2
Steve,
readings
might
and
as well stay
Mr.
right there for the next one. Or, I'm sorry, no,
Mrs. Teener on 14.
Tina on the next one.
All right. And 2 readings. Yeah, you can stay at the podium, Stephen.
Yeah.
I think we're going to need you here in a second.
Yeah.
The next item on the agenda is Resolution 1523. It's a resolution to set the 2023 revenue and expense budget and amend certificate with the county auditor and the Water Construction Fund 6026, Water Utility Reserve Fund 6027, Wastewater Utility Reserve Fund 6029, Wastewater Construction Fund 6030, and authorize the then and now certificate for the 2022 obligations that will be paid from the 2023 budget. Mr. James.
Once again, I'll yield to Stephen Wellstead for some
Yeah, again,
additional explanation.
yeah, same legislation essentially as the last one, so this covers the, again, 26, 27, 29, and 30 accounts. First 2 being water, and the last 2 being water pollution control.
Great. Mr. Matlin, 2 readings. All right, the next item
Thank you.
we have on the agenda is Resolution 1623. A resolution to submit to the Fairfield County Auditor a request to certify the total current valuation of the city and the dollar amount of revenue that would be generated from a replacement levy of 3 mills for the purpose of general construction, reconstruction, resurfacing, and repair of streets, roads, and bridges in the city and declaring an emergency. This is coming out of the Law Committee. Mrs. Teener.
Yes, I'll let Stephanie explain what we're doing here on this.
Thank you, Councilwoman Teener. So, City Council did a resolution of necessity previously in order to get the figures on the 3 mil levy, the potential 3 mil levy revenue that would be generated. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, the Ohio General Assembly decided to change Ohio's election law significantly last year. They did that last June, with most of that going into effect in September, some of it going into effect in December. But the Secretary of State's office hasn't provided a whole lot of guidance in terms of how that law, those changes are going to actually impact the way ballot issues are done. And so there is some new language, and I was working through that with the county auditor and the Board of Elections, who've both been very helpful. And they advised that they think we need to tweak certain things in order to make sure that we are expressly complying with that new law. Specifically, for example, I thought that by saying the city electors would vote on this in the city of Lancaster, that it would be clear that only, the city parcels are those to be taxed, and only the city electors are the ones that get to make that decision. But they thought it needed to be a little bit more express than that. And so that's why I made the changes that I did. If anybody has any additional questions about those, feel free to ask specifically, but that's the general reason that we have to do this. And I apologize for that, but they really didn't have any idea on how to weigh in until after we had already started in this process, so that's why we're here now.
Any questions for Law Director Hall?
Thank you.
Mrs. Teener?
I really don't want to, it's not a question, I want to thank you for everything that you did, because that was a lot of learning, and it's a learning curve, and it's just something we got to make sure that it's right. So I thank you for doing all that,
Yep, no problem.
and we will be suspending.
Thank you. Mr. Schoonover will be the sponsor, and you'll be the second on that. Is that what we're doing? Oh, no, not tonight. Yes. Who has the second on that one?
Mr. Ehlers.
She is.
Mr. Ehlers. All right. Sponsor, Mrs. Teener. Second, Mr. Ehlers. Suspension for tonight as required by law to get it through. All right, the next item we have on the agenda is Resolution 1723. Resolution to amend the certificate with the county auditor and appropriate from the unencumbered balance, increase receipts, and complete fund transfer in the wastewater fund 6004 and the wastewater utility reserve 6029. This is coming out of water wastewater. Mr. James.
Thank you again, Pro Tem President McDaniel. I'm going to invite Stephen Wellstead to the podium one more time, and I think that should do it for us. But this is a covenant issue. So go ahead, Steve.
Just to, reiterate what Tom said. To my understanding, again, this transfer is from the 04 to the 29 account to make sure we're complying with all of our bond covenant requirements.
Any questions for Mr. Wellstead? Hearing none. Mr. James.
2 readings, and Mr. Matlin will be my second.
All
Thank
right.
you.
2 readings. Mr. Matlin will be the second. Now, do we have any departmental updates? Chief Snyder?
Good evening. I'd like to thank members of council for providing an opportunity for me to speak tonight and provide an update on the latter half of 22 moving into 23 for the police department. I've not been police chief for a very long time. However, my entire career has been at the Lancaster Police Department, and I can safely say I've never been prouder to put a Lancaster Police Department badge on my chest than right now. The men and women at that department are working tirelessly and breaking their back to provide a high quality of service for the Lancaster citizens, and we've got a lot of good things going, and I'm very proud of that. The main 2 objectives that I want to talk to council and the citizens of Lancaster tonight about are 2 issues that arose out of the December 12th city council meeting. Separate issues, but same event. The first one was a citizen complaint by Avery Patterson stating her issues with the lack of response from the police department to her area at 188 Sells Road. Those issues were both shocking and surprising to me. And as everyone knows, there's a lot to every version of events, but my first gut reaction was to call Ms. Patterson and have her in to discuss that personally with me. So we could go over reports, body camera footage, and statistics and really get down to the nuts and bolts of what occurred. And I'll skip for time's sake all the intricacies of that conversation, but I can safely say that at the end of that, Ms. Patterson was very satisfied with our discussion. There were a lot of things that were misinterpreted or not known, and a lot of what was said that night at City Council just was not true. And I'm not speaking out of pocket or out of context here. At the end of that conversation, I asked Ms. Patterson if she would have any issue with me responding to City Council in this way, and she did not. I, in fact, invited Ms. Patterson with me tonight to come to City Council to assist in responding. She just couldn't make it. So anybody that had issue with that statement or those statements from Ms. Patterson that night, more than free to ask questions, more than free to have the same meeting that she did with me. I'm very confident in our response to that, and I know the type of work that our men and women do, and it just was not represented in that statement. So I wanted to put that one to bed, so to speak. The second one, although it is done, it is passed, it is finalized, is regarding the 2023 budget for the Lancaster Police Department. There were 3 issues that were discussed or talked about at the last council meeting that I did not have an opportunity to discuss or provide clarity on. One being staffing shortage, the second being the HVAC system upgrade at the police department, and the third being a vehicle that we requested and was approved for purchase. First 2 are relatively simple. The staffing shortage, we were at 69 officers. We are now authorized at 75, so I appreciate the citizens of Lancaster and you all for allowing that to occur. I think that will definitely alleviate some issues and allow us to progress forward with the Director Patrol Unit, our K-9 unit, and several different outreach programs that we have within the community. That is, however, often used as a scapegoat sometimes for lack of police service. So sometimes I hear, oh, they don't have the manpower, so that's why that happened. I can assure you, and I will tell you, and my officers will tell you, that excuse is not allowed at our agency. There's no quality of service that should suffer because we don't have the amount of officers that we need. If we're there and we're dealing with you, your quality service should be 100%. And I'm unaware of any time that it wasn't. And if somebody has an issue with our department or with our officers where they feel that was less than 100%, I'm more than willing to discuss that too. Because those people aren't here to defend themselves, that's my job. So we do not pick and choose what crimes we respond to. We do not pick and choose what laws we enforce. We respond to everything we can within our means. The second one is the HVAC system upgrade. I'm not an engineer. I don't work for an HVAC company. I have no idea what the cost will be. I was just as surprised as everyone else. What I do know is my first week being chief, I went up to the locker room where the guys have to dress and get off their armor and their guns and their handcuffs and their 35 pounds of equipment, and it was 97 degrees up there. So what I know is it's my job to make sure they don't have to change out in 97-degree weather. So however we needed to progress that is what I am willing to do. I also believe that having an HVAC system that works and having staffing at 75 is not mutually exclusive to having an armored response vehicle either, which is also absolutely necessary. The goal of that vehicle is to provide safe travel for our officers to and from a location, preferably a dynamic location. It's also to provide safe closure and safe comfort and a safe area to evacuate people from a dynamic situation. It is not used for drug raids. It is not. The NTOA, the OTOA, the National Tactical Officers Association, the Ohio Tactical Officer Association actually implore us to not go dynamic on drug raids. That's been going on for about 10 years now. So we don't run in with a bunch of flashbangs and people running inside and just to grab a drug warrant, just to grab a bag of dope. We don't do that. Now, will that vehicle show up on some of those things? Absolutely. That's because we get shot at. Just last week, our officers responded to J.D. Henderson's bar here in the city on a report of 7 shots fired. They get there, there's 7 shell casings on the ground. That guy retreats to his house, and his family's in there, his wife and his kids. There's a hostage situation. I don't have one piece of armor that I can send with my officers to that. So they're hiding behind sheet metal on their patrol cars and trees. That's, to me, that's unacceptable. So that's the reason I placed that in the budget. That's the reason that it's needed. I hope to God that thing never leaves the garage. We're not going to put it in a parade. We're not going to place it at any type of event other than educational purposes and training. So that thing, it's a success if it stays in the garage and we never use it. However, I'm not going to be the chief of police that's any number of these thousands of small towns that has a dynamic event with egg on our face that we can't protect our officers or our citizens. The comparisons that were made that we could just use the sheriff's office or we could just use their vehicle, I have to disagree with those categorically. It's not possible. In fact, I was on a situation that Chief McDaniel was familiar with in 2016 where there's drywall and wood frame exploding around us because we're taking shots at a door, and we had to back off and hide behind a set of concrete stairs because we didn't have a vehicle to protect us. And it took 2 hours. I must provide some clarity here. The sheriff's office is great, and we work with them great, but when you put feet to pavement and really have to deal with a real-world situation, it took 2 hours to get their armor there. Not to mention what they use is called a mine-resistant vehicle. It's about 12 feet wide, and it won't fit down any alley in the city of Lancaster. That vehicle is not appropriate for a city. We chose the correct and appropriate vehicle for the city. So if we're going to put fire detectors in schools and buy pump trucks for large 5-alarm fires, I do not see the difference between having this piece of equipment to protect our officers or our citizens if something happens there. That is the reason it was placed in the budget. I'm more than happy to discuss any of these things with anyone at all, at any time, so long as it works for your schedule, but I have to hear about it first. Okay, I'm responding like this because of the first that I heard of these concerns is a city council meeting. And then the citizens of Lancaster have to hear that as well. And I don't think that's fair to them. I don't care what's fair to me. It's my job to have egg on my face, and it's my job to take hits for my officers, but it's not fair to the citizens, and it's not fair to my officers. So that's why I'm here tonight. If anybody has any questions regarding that, I know it's passed, I know it's approved, but I'd be more than happy to give statistics or real-life representation of why those things are needed.
Any questions for Chief Snyder? Mrs. Teener?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. I know what's happened with me, and I know what's happened with some of my constituents, and I know there are some people here on council that are council people that won't say anything but have complaints too. But they won't say anything on council floor, they won't say anything at all, and they need to speak up. Thank you.
Ms. Teener, if I may respond or no? Ms. Teener, I'm unfamiliar with the complaints you're talking about specifically. I know you and I have had 2 communications since I've been chief of police. two communications, both of quality of life issues in the area that you serve. Both were successful. Both I immediately responded. Both my officers immediately responded. So I'm unaware of the complaints that you're talking about.
Well,
However, I think this is probably the inappropriate place to get into a
Well,
specific discussion.
I will tell you something. I called to talk to you specifically, and I got called by somebody else when I asked to and talked to the secretary to talk to you. This was a few months ago. I got called by somebody else that, of course, you're the chief, so it was, I believe it was Caton. And I asked specifically to speak with you, and I never got a return phone call. So I don't know if you never got that. I don't know, but you were the one I asked to speak with.
I can't speak to specifics. I can't. I can tell you that I'm more than happy to have any discussion with you at any time. My office door is always open. I'm at every city council meeting, almost every city council meeting every week. Any more of a way that I can make myself available to you, I will. I can't speak to that specific situation, but I can tell you, just like Ms. Patterson, what usually is represented out in public was much different once we met. And maybe that would be the situation as well if we met.
I tried to talk to you, but I didn't get a call back, so.
So maybe
apologize
Mrs.
for
Teener and
that.
Chief Snyder can speak at some time in the future. Chief, I want to thank you for being an advocate for your officers, as we would expect you to be. I do know that there was discussion about various elements of the police department budget. As you would expect, it's $11 million budget,
Yes, sir.
approximately. There was discussion about the armored vehicle amongst council, but the budget passed 9-0. And that's because we discussed it and the decisions were made to pass the.
7 to
I'm sorry. Yes, the budget was 7-2. I stand corrected. But it did pass with 7 supporting council people for those items that you discussed. I think our duty, as we promised the citizens of Lancaster, is to provide safety forces that are capable of responding to the emergent situations as they happen. And I believe that those things that you advocated for can enhance your ability to do that job. So we appreciate your comments. You have anything else you'd like to add?
I appreciate city council. I did not mean that directed towards really any specific purpose other than the comments that I heard at that meeting I felt needed responded to on the sake of my officers and the citizens. So it's not necessarily directed at council. I have great relationships with council.
So on a much lighter note, I would like to wish Chief Snyder a happy birthday.
This is untrue. Your mid-20s are very hard, but.
Yes. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Matlin.
Just to clarify, the items you were talking about, we discussed, I think, at depth at our safety committee meeting.
Absolutely.
In November, I think it was.
We did.
And that made it into the minutes or notes from the meeting, because I did them. So if somebody wanted to read those, should not have been a surprise that the police department was spending this money. And
No,
so-
no, sir.
Anything else for Chief Snyder? Yes, Mr. James.
Just so much, not a question, as a comment. I've lived here long enough to have lived through when we lost one of our officers to a burglary and robbery, and I don't want to see that happen again. And I appreciate your concern for your officers, because they're really important
They are.
to this whole thing.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Any other departmental updates? Yes, Mayor.
If nobody else has an update. I'm going to address an issue that has come up, and we've become aware that there are certain areas in the city, in fact, a lot of areas in the city, where we have access issues, especially for people who don't drive, for micromobility users, and people that walk, bike, or whatever. And there was an idea put forward that we could allocate a small portion of the 3 mil levy, which is going to be on the ballot in May, to that, to solving those issues. And as a result of some of the issues that the law director mentioned earlier, and the Secretary of State and the Board of Elections, it became apparent that it was nearly impossible to do that and make it an allocation of the 3 mil levy. But as a result of all those conversations, It's also apparent that there seems to be significant support on council to allocate some funds from the general fund for those purposes going forward. And I just wanted to let everyone know that we will be bringing forth legislation at the January 23rd council meeting to allocate some general fund to a budget update for those purposes.
Anyone have any questions for the mayor on that? We're specific, yes, Mr. Ehlers.
I don't know if you have it already, but with the allocation, do you know like how much you may be asking for at this time or not yet?
I don't, anticipating that the 3 mil levy would generate something like $2.4 to $2.5 million, and we don't know that yet because we have to pass this legislation tonight before the county auditor will provide the exact numbers, but at a 5% allocation, that would have been $120,000 to $125,000, so something in that ballpark. Obviously, we don't know what some of these things cost, but that amount of money could be local match for grants that are available for those things, or some of them might be able to be done with direct expenditures for smaller projects. So, we can't do, or don't want to do, because of time and staffing involved, a lot of planning on any of those projects before we have money available to do it. So once we have the money, then we can take a look at the issues that we are facing, look at the costs, prioritize which projects get done first, and then move forward in that regard. And I'm sure council will have an opportunity to approve contracts or whatever for any of those projects that are brought forth.
And one more question.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what department you'd be asking to oversee that money?
Service Safety Director and the Law Director and I had some conversation about that today, and we have not disclosed this to City Engineer Schonk yet, but it seemed like the consensus was that the Engineering Department would be the best place to put that, as they obviously have a lot of input into that, and they currently also administer the sidewalk program, which we passed a couple of years ago.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments for the mayor? Questions? Yes, Mr.
Just one
James.
briefly. I've received a lot of emails from people that are highly supportive of this kind of expenditure. Like you said, there's a whole lot more people walking, riding bicycles, other means of transportation other than vehicles. So I think it's very appropriate.
And with the increase in sales in e-bikes recently, and they seem to be everywhere, it appears that biking on errands or shopping is becoming more popular than driving cars, and certainly is more friendly to the environment with all the publicity that's going on regarding cutting down carbon emissions, et cetera.
Anything else on this topic? Thank you, Mayor. Any other departmental updates? Hearing none, we'll move to tonight's meeting prep. The first item for the meeting prep is temporary ordinance 123, and it's ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as part of the various component codes of the codified ordinances of the city of Lancaster and declaring an emergency. It's coming out of law. Mrs. Teener.
Yes, this is something we also do every year, and I'll have Stephanie speak to that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Teener. So yes, annually, we are required to update the Lancaster Codified Ordinance, which is based in part upon the Ohio Revised Code. So as the Ohio Revised Code changes, there are portions of the Lancaster Codified Ordinance that mirror that, and they need to be changed as well. And so we do that once a year because the codification is so very expensive. We try and just do that annually at the beginning of the year and then wait until the next year for the changes that are coming down the pike.
Any questions on that? Thank you. Mrs. Teener, you're second on that. Mr. Schoonover, is that what I see there?
Yes. Two
And
readings, please.
2 readings.
First two.
Next item on our agenda is temporary ordinance 223. It's to accept the final plat for the Broad and Canal subdivision and declare an emergency. It's coming out of Code of Enforcement and Zoning. Mr. Ehlers.
Yeah, this is just to approve the final plat for over on Broad Street and Canal. This is the area where the Dollar General will be built. So we're just asking for suspension tonight to help the developers get started on their projects here.
And the suspension is based on timing of property changing hands or something to that
Just trying to
effect.
keep it all moving. And then Mr. Ailes will be my second.
Mr. Ailes?
Mhm.
Mr. Ailes is a second and will suspend on temporary ordinance 223. Temporary resolution 14222. This is coming out of law. It is, Mrs. Teener, this is the one regarding the election law changes, is that correct?
Right, and so we'll be doing a lot with that one tonight. We're removing it from the table, replacing it, and then putting it back on the table. So, and Stephanie's already really explained all that in depth earlier, so about that.
This relates to what Stephanie just spoke about.
Yes.
This allows us to comply with the changes and update everything, and it's back on the table until we get figures from the county auditor. Is that
That's
correct?
accurate. Yes, sir, thank you.
Anyone have any questions on 14222? All right, are there any other items for finance? Mr. Ehlers, you're the second on that, 14222, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Thank you. Any other items for finance? Hearing none. Mr. Ailes, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. 6:46. The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will start at 6:55.
You walked down the aisle and promised happily ever after. Sometimes happily ever after means ending a relationship. We know the conversations are not easy. Deciding what's best for you, your children, and your next steps takes work and communication. At Dagger Law, we know there are no monsters in a divorce, only people trying to find their way. Local, trusted, experienced. Dagger Law.
From all of us at United Way, we say thank you, Buckeye Toyota, for once again offering your support.
Thank you, Buckeye Toyota. We are extremely grateful for your continued support.
Thank you, Buckeye Toyota.
Thank you, Buckeye Toyota, for helping us help our kids here at AHA.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
So Wilson. Oh, I gotta stand up.
Good evening. Welcome to Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we come to you this hour asking for your blessing and help as we are gathered. We pray for your guidance in the matters at hand and ask for you that you would clearly show us how to conduct our work in the best interest of the city and its residents. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I hereby call Lancaster City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please bear with us for a second.
Yeah, no problem. I don't want it.
Probably be a few minutes before we get.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Here.
Mr. Ailes? Here. Mrs. Kreitz? Mr. James?
Here.
Mr. Matlin?
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
Mrs. Teener?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to excuse Mrs. Kreitz and President Wolf from tonight's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to excuse Mrs. Kreitz and President Old from tonight's meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. President, I move that Lancaster City Council suspend its rules and take exception to the normal order of business pursuant to Lancaster Codified Ordinance 111.08 by reading and considering temporary resolutions 1323 and 1623, as well as temporary ordinance 223 before the remainder of the legislation on tonight's agenda.
We have a motion to go outside the regular order of business and handle Resolution 1323, 1623, and Ordinance 223. All in favor signify by saying aye. Voice vote. Okay, we need roll call on that. I apologize. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to go outside the regular order of business passes 7-0. The first item we will deal with is temporary resolution 1323.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding and enter into a contract with the Axon for the Lancaster Police Department interview room recording system to authorize the issuance of a then and now certificate and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. Ailes.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of resolution number 1323.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of Resolution 1323. Discussion, Mr. Ailes.
I think we had all the discussion we needed.
Anyone have any questions on 1323? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 7-0. Mr. Ailes.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily ordered 1323, number 1323.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Resolution temporarily numbered 1323. Discussion, Mr. Ailes.
I have none.
Any discussion on 1323? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Temporary Resolution 1323 passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is Temporary Resolution 1623.
A resolution to submit to the Fairfield County Auditor a request to certify the total current tax valuation of the city and the dollar amount of revenue that would be generated from the replacement levy of 3 mills for the purpose of general construction, reconstruction, resurfacing, and repair of streets, roads, and bridges, and bridges in the city and declaring an emergency, offered by Mrs. Teener and seconded by Mr. Ayers.
Mrs. Teener.
Mr. President Pro Tem, I make a motion to remove resolution, Mr. President Pro Tem, I would like to make a motion that the City Council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 1623.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 1623. Discussion, Ms. Teener. Discussion on suspending 1623, anyone? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 7-0. Mrs. Teener.
Mr. President Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and engross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 1623.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 1623. Discussion.
No, this is, is actually regarding the tax levy, but we will be bringing that one back to the next table.
The one.
Oh, okay. Stephanie, do you want to explain this so that?
Sure. Yes,
we
just
did-
briefly, as I stated in finance, so the law changed. It made significantly more language required to be in any kind of ballot issue legislation. And so after consultation with the auditor's office and the Board of Elections, they suggested some additional language that they would like to see. And in order to satisfy them, I included that in this version of the certification request to the county auditor. So this is just the certification request for the revenue amounts to the county auditor.
Any questions on passing, or the resolution to pass 1623? Any questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 1623 passes 7-0. The next item we have is temporary ordinance 223.
A resolution to accept the final plat for the Broad and Canal subdivision and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. Ayers and seconded by Mr. Ailes.
Mr. Ayers.
Yeah, this is just a piece to accept the plat of Broad and Canal subdivision, which is where Dollar General is going to go.
Any discussion? Mr. Ayers.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 2-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of ordinance temporary number 2-23. Discussion, Mr. Ayers.
None today.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 7-0. Mr. Ayers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 2-23.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporary number 223. Discussion, Mr. Ayers.
None today.
Discussion. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 2-23 passes 7-0.
Mr. President, I move that Lancaster City Council resume normal order of business pursuant to Lancaster Codified Ordinance 111.07 at this time.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to return to the regular order of business. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to pass, or to return the regular order of business passes 7-0.
Mr. President, I make a motion to excuse Mr. Schoonover from the rest of the meeting and thank him for coming in while he's sick.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to excuse Mr. Schoonover for the remainder of the meeting. Voice vote.
Voice.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Mr. Schoonover, thank you for coming in. We know that you probably should be at home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to return to the regular order of business on our agenda, and we are now at the reading and disposal of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated December 12th, 2022.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Email dated January 3rd, 2023 regarding cancellation of code enforcement and zoning meeting submitted by Mr. Ehlers. Email dated January 5th, 2023 regarding 3-mill levy amendment legislation submitted by Superintendent Greg Hentz. Email dated January 6th, 2023 regarding 3-mill levy submitted by President Uhl. Email dated January 6th, 2023 regarding 3-mill levy submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Email dated January 6, 2023, regarding legislation for City Council January 9, 2023, submitted by Law Director Stephanie Hall. Email dated January 9, 2023, regarding Finance Committee meeting agenda, submitted by Mr. McDaniel. And finally, an email dated January 9, 2023, regarding the Division of Water temporary resolution, submitted by Michael Wickham, Manager, the North Water Treatment Plant. I have North Water Treatment Plant.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the reports of city officials. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any communications?
We have 4. Email dated December 28, 2022 regarding please support allocating a percentage of 3-mill paving levy to trails and mobility corridors, submitted by Ira Weiss, President Fairfield Heritage Trail. Email dated January 6, 2023 regarding additional comments and supports of Mayor Scheffler's proposal to dedicate funds for trails, submitted by Ira Weiss, President Fairfield Heritage Trail. Email dated notice to the legislative authority of a transfer of a liquor license from SK Investments Fuel, Inc., located at 602 East Main Street, Lancaster, Ohio, 43130, to KSA Lancaster LLC, located at 602 East Main Street, Lancaster, Ohio, submitted by the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. And finally, an email dated January 9, 2023, regarding the 3-mill paving allocation, submitted by Miss Amy Williams, 3rd Ward.
Mr. President, make a motion to receive and file communications.
Second.
We have a motion to receive and a second to receive and file communications. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Do we have a special presentation or awards this evening?
There are none to be presented.
Do we have any petitions or memorials this evening?
There are none to be presented.
During this time, we set aside time to allow voters and taxpayers of the city to address council on any item or issue they would like. If you would like or be interested in addressing Lancaster City Council, please come to the podium, sign in on the green clipboard with your name and address, and state the same for the record. Please note that members of council will not respond to you during this time, but may choose to do so at a later time during the meeting. In accordance with the rules of council, we ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Is there anyone who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Please come forward to the podium. Again, sign in on the green clipboard. State your name and address for us.
I'm Ed Payne, and I live at 465 Overlook Drive, Northeast. I was here at the City Council once before in 1998, requesting curb cuts. Well, there are now a lot of curb cuts in the city of Lancaster, thanks to everybody. And there's also transportation ways to get around on scooters like mine. The only comment I would like to make is that we do transportation at the Fairfield Center for Disabilities and Cerebral Palsy. We now have 16 vehicles and drivers taking people to medical appointments, and we make use of those curb cuts a lot. That's really all I have to say. Thank you for all that you do for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Payne. Is there anyone else who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Please come forward.
Sky Cable. I work here in Lancaster, and although Dr. Payne said they have improvements in curb cuts, there are also several intersections that will have curb cuts. And as we move forward with anything that the council has in mind, I do want to say that first we'll have to see numerous complaints for the past 2 years about curb cuts. And also, in addition to accessibility, is they need to do it correctly. For example, the improvements down there on South Water Street, the for parking, there were accessible spaces. However, in the access aisle, which in HOA has this regard to see what it is I'm describing, in the access aisle, which allows a wheelchair to go from the parking space to the sidewalk, there's a tree. So a person who enters a vehicle on Broad Street cannot access the sidewalk because there's a tree blocking the way to the sidewalk. They have to go around the cars down to the corner to access the sidewalk onto the street. So although it's great that accessibility is done, it has to be done correctly. Okay, now I can't point to any standard in the accessible standards that says that you can't do this. But what it does say is that, if I may, when you think about most cross vehicular and traffic lanes, it's preferable that the accessible route not pass behind parked vehicles. And the reason's obvious. It's a safety issue, okay? So I can say, no, you can't do this, but it's just not safe. If you're in a wheelchair, you have to go out to the street, down the few cars behind the parked cars, and get onto the sidewalk. So number one, as you move forward, keep in mind accessibility as required under Title II of the American Disabilities Act. Number two, do it right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak with Lancaster City Council? Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Everett, and I reside at 201 South High Street. I am here this evening to request that council seriously consider not only the safety of pedestrians, bicyclists, and those who use alternative modes of transportation like wheelchairs, scooters, and electric mobility units, but also the economic development opportunities when we prioritize people over cars. While the purpose of roads is to get people from point A to point B as quickly and safely as possible, streets are for everyone, and it is the responsibility of city leadership to ensure that safe infrastructure exists for those who cannot or for those who choose not to get around by car. A lack of traffic enforcement is only one component of the currently critically unsafe situation we experience as pedestrians and cyclists on our streets. Couple that with smooth, wide roads and prioritization of cars over people, and it is unsurprising that we have had 4 that I know of, pedestrians and cyclists hit by cars and trucks in the last 2 months alone. And that is before my friend that I invited to come here was tragically hit on his way here tonight, crossing legally in a crosswalk. As a resident and walker and bicyclist, I am almost hit every week by a distracted and entitled driver. I'm not including the ones that I know are just going on purpose for me. As an economic development professional, I can tell you from research that I know you have also read that young talent is demanding quality of place. People want to live in vibrant, walkable, and bikeable cities where they do not have to rely on cars. We always hear about parking issues. Well, there's a growing population of people that want to spend money in places, and our city is one of them, in places that they can access without using a car. And wouldn't you all love to stop hearing about the parking problems that we have in downtown Lancaster? I certainly know that I would. Wouldn't you all love to stop hearing about that? Our continued growth and development must include a comprehensive plan to not only keep our citizens safe, but to create safer streets that invite the vibrancy and commerce that we know that safe infrastructure brings. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak with Lancaster City Council? Please come forward. Sign in on the green clipboard for us.
Sorry, sir.
Good evening, council members. My name is Brian Everett. I coincidentally also reside at 201 South High Street, like the young lady before me. I'm here briefly to be a squeaky wheel in the hopes of getting some oil. My focus, surprise, is the suitability or lack of suitability of our city's streets for those who are not traveling in motor vehicles. I walk and cycle these streets much more frequently than I drive, and I can say that doing so is dangerous, scary, and significantly more risky than it has to be. I would also echo that almost on a weekly basis I get bumped by a car that's turning right on red without stopping or looking, a car that refuses to stop in a marked crosswalk, or a car where somebody is doing who knows what on their phone. I do it by choice, but many of our more vulnerable citizens have no choice in their method of transportation. The danger of these incomplete streets around our city should be of no surprise to anyone. It was in almost to the day, it was in early February in 2009 when Charlie Kane Jr. was hit and killed on Sheridan Drive. Sheridan Drive is a street with little to no sidewalks. Despite that and numerous other injury crashes, it was over a decade before sidewalks were finally installed in portions of Sheridan, which includes, Sheridan includes schools, restaurants, medical offices. And admittedly, those sidewalks are pretty terrible. If you've ever walked them, they do not have any tree or tree lawn between the street and the sidewalk. They are right up against a wide, flat street where people regularly go 45 to 50 miles an hour. Our city needs to stop focusing solely on cars and focus on all users of streets. If you live further away from somewhere, it takes longer to get there. That's simple geography, physics, whatever you want to measure it with. And the ability of someone to get to the mall, get to any road, get to their location when they choose to live further away, it's just going to take longer. And their ability to drive their multi-ton, climate-controlled mobile living room wherever they want, as quickly as they want, shouldn't be the predominant design consideration in our streets. Rather, our streets should be complete streets where kids can walk to schools or parks, where older residents can age in place, and where those of limited mobility can safely live their lives. In the past, I've offered to City Council or any other person in this room that wants to go on a walk for me, I'd be happy to join them. That offer still stands. We can walk up Columbus Street, which is one of the oldest streets in this community, named for where it used to go, where there are still no sidewalks in many places. We can walk to CVS and explore what is most likely the scariest sidewalk in the area. I don't even think it's a foot wide. It runs along Memorial Drive, which is essentially a 4-lane highway, especially for cars speeding up as they exit and go on South 33 or as they come into town from the south, and do not slow down to 35 miles per hour until well into town. We can walk to our schools and our parks and our businesses and you can see firsthand what daily life looks like to a significant number of our citizens. I would put forth that the job of council, the difficult job, and I admit that, and I thank you all for it, is to sometimes do what needs to be done for those who may not have the loudest voice. And now I'm asking you give consideration in the design of our streets and our community to those who cannot come before you, whether it's because of lack of mobility, lack of time, lack of ability, or the ability to not take time off of work, unfortunately, to come in and ask for the ability to move around their community safely. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak with Lancaster City Council this evening? Anyone else that would like to speak with Lancaster City Council? Thank you for being here. Reports of standing committees.
I have received one, Finance Committee meeting minutes dated January 9th, 2023, submitted by Mr. McDaniel.
Make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the reports of standing committees. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Are there any reports of special committees?
There are none to be presented.
We do have a public hearing this morning, or this evening, I should say. Feels like morning. We've been here a little while. Tonight, we have a public hearing on temporary ordinance 4422. Let me take a moment to outline the rules and procedure of our public hearing. I will first ask the clerk to read the preamble of the ordinance that we are considering. After that, the sponsor of the legislation will make some opening remarks. Once he or she provides comments, we will open the floor to allow comments from those in attendance. I will first call for proponents of the legislation to come forward. If you are in favor of this particular piece of legislation, you can come forward and sign in on the silver clipboard and state your name and address for the record. You will then be able to proceed with your comments. After proponents speak, the opponents will be given the same opportunity. Once we make it through the first round, we will then bring proponents back for any rebuttal. Please note that if you speak the second time around as a proponent or opponent, you must have spoken in the first round. After the proponents speak, the opponents will be given another opportunity. After that is done, we will turn it back over to the sponsor for any closing comments before we close the public hearing. With that, I hereby open this public hearing, and I'll ask the clerk to read the legislation.
An ordinance establishing a new chapter 1130 of the Lancaster Codified Ordinances entitled Solar Energy Systems and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. Ehlers.
Mr. Ehlers.
Yeah, so this will add language to our city ordinances or codes to bring some regulations to solar energy with homes and businesses. This is a part of the Soul Smart project to get us to a gold standard, and you have to have some ordinance and codes in order to get to that area. Can't speak to it.
So this came through your committee, and you have discussed it, and this is the approved legislation on behalf of the committee.
Correct.
Anything else?
Nope.
Are there any proponents, those who favor this legislation, that would like to speak? Mr. Mayor.
I don't see anyone else here, so I'll address it briefly. This came up with the idea of more and more solar installations are being done in the city of Lancaster. I think in the last couple of years, we might have had 18 in 2021 and something like 21 or 22 last year. And this is an effort to update our ordinances to recognize that solar is an important part of our energy future and to facilitate putting solar panels on roofs and in yards, especially in residential and in other areas in commercial or industrial spaces. And this is the, I guess, model language that has been adopted by many other communities and just will facilitate solar going forward. And it will be adopted in our major zoning update coming sometime early this year.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents in favor of this legislation that would like to speak to council? Any other proponents? Are there any opponents, those who are opposed to this legislation who would like to speak? Any opponents to this legislation who would like to speak? Seeing none, we will move back to proponents. Mayor, do you have any further comments?
No further comment.
Mr. Ehlers, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, this will be a good step forward for the city, so I urge a yes vote. That's all.
Are there any other comments related to this, from council related to this legislation? Mr. James?
Just briefly, I'm certainly one of the beneficiaries of this particular, these ordinances. I've installed 8,000 watts of solar panels on my roof, and they didn't get started on generating electricity until mid-November. But as of today, I've created almost 700 kilowatt hours of electricity in hopes of, over an annual basis of, I'll probably do about 12,000 kilowatt hours. And every kilowatt hour that I've been able to generate means that we've not had to burn any kind of fossil fuel to do that. And I appreciate these new ordinances to help other people realize it's really a good benefit.
Thank you, Mr. James. Anyone else? With that, we will close the public hearing. We will now have first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with Resolution 123.
A resolution authorizing the law director to apply for the Violence Against Women Act VAWA grant, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mrs. Teener.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 123. Temporary resolution 223, sorry.
I just jumped ahead of you, that's my fault.
Yeah.
A resolution authorizing the Lancaster City Auditor to request an advance of funds from Fairfield County of City's apportionment of tax settlements for 2023, offered by Mr. Ailes and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Ailes.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 223, temporary resolution 323.
A resolution authorizing the disposition of city property no longer needed via auction or internet auction for 2023, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mrs. Teener.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on resolution 323, temporary resolution 423.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation to purchase sodium chloride rock salt for the 2023 through 2024 winter season, offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. James.
First of three readings, thank you.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 423, temporary resolution 523.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of chemicals for use by the Division of Water, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Thank you. First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 523, temporary resolution 623.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of pipe and fittings for use by the Division of Water, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
Thank you. This is the first of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 623, temporary resolution 723.
A resolution authorizing the Lancaster Police Department to apply for the 2023 through 2024 Drug Use Prevention Grant, offered by Mr. Matlin and seconded by Mr. Ehlers.
Mr. Matlin.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 723, temporary resolution 823.
A resolution authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for construction of the South Water Treatment Plant Sodium Hydrochloride Feed System Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Teener.
Mr. James.
Thank you. This is also first of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 823, temporary resolution 923.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor and the local fiscal recovery fund 2052, offered by Mr. Ehlers and seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Ailes.
Mr. Ailes, excuse me.
First of two.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 923, temporary resolution 1023.
A resolution to carry over and appropriate funds to pay bills in the Water Replacement and Improvement Fund 6025, and to authorize the issuance of then and now certificates for payments of bills, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
Thank you, Superintendent McDaniel. First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 1023, temporary resolution 1123.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to dispense with competitive bidding for a sole source provider for filter media, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Once again, sound like a broken record. First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 1123, temporary resolution 1223.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement through the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program as implemented of the Fetters Run Ohio University Lancaster Stream Restoration Project, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 1223. We've already handled temporary resolution 1323. Next is temporary resolution 1423.
A resolution to set a 2023 revenue and expense budget, then amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor in the Stormwater Utility Reserve Fund 6019, and authorize a then and now certificate for 2020 obligations that will be paid from the 2023 budget, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
First of two readings. Thank you.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 1423, temporary resolution 1523.
A resolution to set a 2023 revenue and expense budget, then amend the certificate with the county auditor in the Water Construction Fund 6026, Water Utility Reserve Fund 6027, Wastewater Utility Reserve Fund 6029, and the Water Construction Fund 6030, and authorize a then and now certificate for 2020 obligations that will be paid from 2023 budget, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
First of two readings.
Again, first of two readings on temporary resolution 1523. We have handled 1623. And the next item is temporary resolution 1723.
A resolution to amend the certificate with the county auditor, appropriate from the unencumbered balance, increase receipts, and complete a fund transfer in the wastewater fund 6004 and in the wastewater utility reserve fund 6029, offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Matlin.
Mr. James.
Once again, first of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 1723. Are there any other resolutions to come before council? If not, we will move to the reading of ordinances, and the first ordinance we have is third reading on temporary ordinance 4422.
An ordinance establishing a new Chapter 1130 of the Lancaster Codified Ordinances entitled Solar Energy Systems and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. Ehlers and seconded by,
I have Mr. Ailes.
that's the one, should be, oh, yeah, Mr. Ailes. I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Ehlers is the sponsor. Mr. Ailes
Too
is the
many
second. Mr. Ehlers.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro
I had
Tem.
said earlier
I would like
this
to make a
one.
motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 44-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file. Let me read this correctly. We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 4422. Mr. Ehlers.
No comment.
This is the ordinance that we had the public hearing on. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any other discussion on ordinance 4422? Motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 4422 passes 7-0. I'm sorry.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I'm sorry. Mr. Schoonover had to leave. We are at 6-0. We have nothing for second reading. We will now have first reading on a series of ordinance, beginning with temporary ordinance 123.
An ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as part of the various component codes of the codified ordinances of Lancaster, Ohio, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Schoonover and seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mrs. Teener.
It's first of two readings.
First of two reading on temporary ordinance 123. We have already addressed temporary ordinance 2-23. Do we have any other ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? Seeing none, we do have a piece of tabled legislation, temporary ordinance 14222. Is there any action on that piece of legislation this evening? Mrs. Teener.
Yes, Mr. President Pro Tem, I make a motion to remove temporary resolution 14222 from the table.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove temporary resolution 14222 from the table. Any discussion, Mrs. Teener?
No, sir.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
The motion to remove 14222 from the table passes 6-0. Mrs. Teener.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record.
No.
Which
No,
one?
no,
Oh, we're doing
no,
this.
Over there,
You got it.
yes.
Bear with us.
I am so sorry. This has all been changed
It's a little
around, so-
complicated.
Mr. President Pro Tem, I make a motion to amend temporary resolution 14222 by replacing it with temporary resolution 14222 star as given to the clerk in writing prior to the meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to replace temporary ordinance 14222 with temporary ordinance or resolution 14222 star as given to the clerk in writing prior to the meeting. Mrs. Teener.
Yes, Mr. President Pro Tem.
I was asking for any additional
Oh,
comments.
no, I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
now call the roll on it.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to replace 14222 with 14222 star passes 6-0. Now, Mrs. Teener.
Mr. President Pro Tem, I make a motion to table temporary resolution 14222 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to place ordinance 14222 star on the table. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
14222 star is on the table. Is there any unfinished business? Any unfinished business? Is there any new business? Any new business? I do have some discussion regarding our street levy and our access and bike lane, mobility lane legislation. As Mayor Shuffler discussed, there's some complications with our street levy that we addressed tonight in our legislation here at council, and some things we have to do with that to comply with the Board of Elections and with state. And a decision has been discussed and made that the street levy is a separate item that will be addressed as its own piece of legislation. And I think the mayor discussed potential opportunities for council and for the administration to come together and fund some of these other requests using a different source of, other than the street levy funds. Mayor, as you mentioned, you talked about bringing some legislation forward at some point in the future regarding this particular request that would address these issues. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I just wanted everyone to know that we share your concerns, and certainly the world is changing. Certainly pedestrians have been endangered in these crosswalks, specifically on Memorial Drive. It's, you know, if you work at Job and Family Services and you got to cross that roadway, be very careful. Lancaster Police Department, I worked there, addressed it. They still want to address it today. There's opportunities for enforcement, but that doesn't take care of your safety when you're out there in the middle of that crosswalk and no police officers around. So we have done things to make that intersection better, but we're talking about one intersection. We know what you're talking about is mobility throughout the entire city in our neighborhoods. on our sidewalks on our way to school, and we share your concerns about those things. I think there's opportunities to address those things, sometimes on a case-by-case basis as we have legislation to improve a certain area or a certain neighborhood or a certain street. There's also opportunities with maybe looking at funding sources from grants to additional general fund revenue, should that be appropriate. But I think we've shown that we're interested in that by what we just did on South Broad Street. And that it's the first effort we've made to try to incorporate those things into our roadways. It certainly won't be the last. And I encourage you to continue. Speak with your council people, speak with the administration. We have opportunities here to address many of these concerns, and we're hopeful that we can do that moving forward. So, does anyone else have any new business? Announcement of scheduled meetings.
The next regular meeting of council is January 23rd at 6:30 PM. The meeting following is February 13th at 6 PM. At that time, we will have a public hearing on the permit to install an application for a new solid waste transfer. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Water pollution control, January the 11th at 8:30 AM at the 1897 conference room. Economic development, January 20th at 7:30 AM at the 1897 conference room. IT Telecom, January 20th at 8 AM at the Zane conference room. Finance, January 23rd at 6 PM at council chambers. Law Committee, February 1st at 11:30 AM at the 1897 conference room. Service, February 3rd at 7:30 AM at the 1897 conference room. And finally, Water pollution, February 8th, 8:30 AM at the 1897 conference room.
Do we have any bills?
We do. Publication of legislation, $183.10. Publication of the notice of a public hearing, $82.80 to MNCO, payable to PNC. Total amount, $265.90.
I'll make a motion to pay the bills.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pay the bill. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No need for an executive session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned.
Oh, I know.
You walked down the aisle and promised happily ever after. Sometimes happily ever after means ending a relationship. We know the conversations are not easy. Deciding what's best for you, your children, and your next steps takes work and communication. At Dagger Law, we know there are no monsters in a divorce, only people trying to find their way. Local, trusted, experienced. Dagger Law.
From all of us at United Way, we say thank you, Buckeye Toyota, for once again offering your support.
Thank you, Buckeye Toyota. We are extremely grateful for your continued support.
Thank you, Buckeye Toyota.
Thank you, Buckeye Toyota, for helping us help our kids here at AHA.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.